Hello, my name is Paul Stewart and I'm standing next to a very large bridge, and today I'm flying with the new airline, China Eastern Airways. Now the Middle Eastern three, so Qatar, Etihad and Emirates, have done a really good job of expanding over the last few decades and appealing to the Western markets, but the Chinese airlines have been lagging behind. So I thought it might be interesting to check out China Eastern's first class product and see how it compares to all the other more established airlines. Now before I get to the flight, make sure you check out my channel for a whole lot more aviation related videos, and feel free to subscribe and tick the notification bell so that YouTube alerts you whenever I upload a new video. Now sit back and enjoy the show. As always, the journey begins at check-in with the usual priority lines, so dropping off my bag was a painless process, and then it was through security and into the lounge. Now China Eastern don't have their own lounge, so they've paid access to China Airlines Lounge, which is Taiwan's national airline. The lounge could be described as average at best, although China Eastern do have their own private room for first class passengers. Inside there you've got more seats, but that's about it. If you want a snack, you'll need to head back out into the main lounge and help yourself. Now when I review first class products, I do like to fly from the airline's home port, as they usually put far more effort into their own lounges, so I won't dwell on the fact that this was reasonably average, especially for first class. As you could see, the view isn't great, so after a quick nibble, I headed for the departure gate, where I managed to see my aircraft arriving. In fact, San Francisco Airport offers pretty good views of the Apron, which makes it a pretty cool airport to visit if you're an av geek. China Eastern's flagship aircraft is the Boeing 777-300ER, and they currently have 20 of them in their long-haul fleet. This particular one is 4.5 years old and is powered by two GE90 engines, which, as any av geek will know, make for some pretty awesome spool-up sounds. Now you can't really appreciate just how large these engines are until you watch the ground staff dwarfed by these great circular monsters. Boarding eventually began and I was shown to my seat by a friendly crew. It's a small first class cabin with only 6 seats in a 1-to-1 layout, which I was sharing with 2 other passengers. Shortly after sitting down, a warm towel and a glass of champagne was offered. Now let's have a look through my suite in more detail. You've got this handy storage spot for clothes integrated into the wall, and in front of you is this TV screen, which was reasonable. Under that you've got this rather odd looking sliding table which disappears into the footrest, and a storage thing. I'll show you that later though. Of course, there's electric sunshades which save you leaning too far forwards, but limit your view. On the other side, there's buttons for the seat, the in-flight entertainment, power plugs, and very excitingly, there's this little air vent, which I was really glad to see since there were no overhead air vents. Because of the big glass pane covering the 3 windows, you couldn't get close to the actual circular windows, so sadly my view was average. So this foot thing folds down to form the end of the bed, and you can also fold the table into it if you want to completely get it out of the way. Now here's the table back out again, and the slippers, pajamas and amenity kit. As always, I'll be giving away the amenity kit to a subscriber, so make sure you check out the end of the video for more details about that giveaway. Now the Pjs themselves are comfy and felt like they were decent quality. Here's the headphones, and a top up of the champagne was brought around. The gate closed and we headed for the runway on a reasonably miserable, windy and rainy day in San Francisco. As the takeoff footage was pretty sad, especially since I was too far forward to get a good view of the wing and engine, I'll only include the spool up. As soon as we cleared the rough weather, the crew started preparing lunch. Being the typical millennial that I am, the crew knew that I would be keen to get into social media, and one of the flight attendants came and connected my phone. While the Wi-Fi was free, it was incredibly slow and I didn't really use it. But anyway, make sure you check me out on Instagram and Facebook for heaps of aviation nerd photos. As it's a 12:15 departure from San Francisco, lunch was served beginning with this pear and goat cheese canapé and beef tenderloin skewer. There was also a bowl of warm nuts and a top-up of the champagne. For the foodies out there, I'll include full pictures of the menus at the end of the video. Now I thought the table was pretty well set out, although unfortunately the napkin didn't have a hole in it, so I couldn't connect it to a button in my shirt. So of course, being the grot that I am, within a minute it was on the floor and my soup was on my t-shirt. The selection of bread tasted fine, as did the braised chicken soup with codonopsis and wolfberry, whatever on earth those two things are. Following that was the appetizer, roasted 5-spice duck with cuttlefish, which tasted fine. Now, do you remember having mice in high school and you would keep them in those cages? Then on the floor you had this grassy stuff. Well, I'm fairly sure that's where this salad was. And finally, the main course, which was pan-fried beef with oriental black pepper sauce. In the spirit of pretty bad analogies, do you remember when you were 18 or 19 and had no money, so you had to buy canned stews and soups, and you always wondered if they came from a dog food factory because they kind of smelt like they did? Well, yes, the beef wasn't great. There was a nice selection of food for dessert, and some crisp fruit followed by some cheese and bits. And then of course, ice cream and chocolate cake, all washed down with some Bailey's Irish cream. At the front of the cabin, instead of 2 more seats in the centre, they've set up this display, and under those are storage lockers, which made up for the lack of storage in the suites and the no overhead lockers. Now the flight attendant told me that I should let her know when I wanted to sleep and she'd make my bed. I said I might later, as I wasn't even tired and it was only the afternoon in San Francisco. Shortly afterwards she came back and insisted that the bed be made, which I thought was kind of odd for first class. Anyway, I went for a squiz at the bathroom and got into my PJs. The toilet itself was lacking in amenities such as toilet brushes, etc., but otherwise was pretty spacious for an airline toilet. When I returned to my seat, it had been converted into a bed. Now, while it is wide and long enough, the mattress was fairly thin and would have benefited from an additional layer. As I actually wasn't sleepy, I didn't care too much, so I closed the doors and settled down for a movie. The in-flight entertainment itself worked okay from a hardware perspective with decent image quality, although the content itself was very limited. There weren't many movies and even less TV shows. Now I understand that English isn't their native language, but that hasn't stopped Emirates, for comparison's sake, from having a huge amount of English content. And if they're wanting to enter the English market, entertainment is something they'll have to work on. I think I watched one movie and otherwise kind of stared at the roof. After a bit of a nap, I had a cup of tea and another warm towel was brought around. Another unusual thing about this flight was that they served breakfast just before we land into Shanghai, at 6 in the evening local time. I would have preferred dinner, but anyway. Unfortunately, I can't work out what this is and can't find the picture of the brekkie menu, so apologies, but it appears to be a combination of Western and Eastern food. It was average, so I asked for an additional fruit plate, which tasted fine. In fact, I was surprised by how fresh the fruit on this flight was. Shanghai was getting closer, and after 10 or so hours, our slow descent began. So I guess it's time to give you my thoughts on China Eastern first class. Let's be honest, having watched this far, you know I'm not going to give it glowing praise, and they still have a long way to go if they want to properly enter the Western market. Now the service itself was mixed. My primary flight attendant was actually quite good and incredibly prompt, with empty plates removed immediately and drinks topped up. The rest of the crew, on the other hand, seemed less involved. I could see that they were supervising her, so I'm assuming she was new, although I barely saw them otherwise. I always make an effort of remembering the crew's names, although I don't recall any introductions and never met the chief flight attendant. As you can see from my footage, the food was only average and the drinks were actually pretty poor. I'll include the drinks menu at the end, but a 12-year-old whiskey is the kind of stuff you clean paintbrushes with and shouldn't be in a first class cabin. But the seat, on the other hand, was perfectly fine. It was more spacious than it looks, and I didn't feel at all claustrophobic when the doors were closed. There's limited storage, with these two ledges being the only places within arm's reach to store anything. I did really like this air vent though, as I always find aircraft cabins too hot. I actually had an interesting experience with the window blinds and I'm keen to get your thoughts on it. Another passenger asked me to close them, and when I opened them again a while afterwards, he asked the crew members to tell me to lower them again. Now don't get me wrong, if it's a flight where you need to change your sleep cycle or know the sun will rise very shortly after falling asleep, I'm perfectly happy to lower them. But this flight left San Fran at midday and arrived at Shanghai at 6 in the evening, so it wasn't really a flight where you needed to sleep. I love the window seat and I always select it so that I can enjoy the view, so I was a little disappointed at being told that I had to keep the windows closed. Now feel free to comment below and vote in my poll as to what I should have done. One final thing that really annoyed me was that they took the headphones before you land, so for about the last 20 minutes of the flight, I couldn't hear the in-flight entertainment. I'm assuming that's so that they're not stolen, but surely they could collect them as we walk off the plane. Maybe I'm being precious, but the implication that I can't be trusted not to steal headphones seems a little tacky for first class. And finally, to the Amenity Kit giveaway. Entry is open to everyone over the age of 13, and you've got 30 days to enter by simply commenting below, including the text MU First Class in brackets. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and check out my channel for many more similar videos, including first class reviews of Emirates, Qatar, Qantas, Cathay, Malaysian, BA, and very shortly, Japan Airlines. And just before I go to the menus, here's an interesting site. A Mahan Air Airbus A340, which is an airline we never get in Australia, and in an increasingly rare aircraft type as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you another time.